So we have got already a taste for some of the personal accounts we will hear later on as well. But now I want to open the floor for questions to the speakers. And there is a microphone here, so you can be heard as well. So any comments, questions? I know that I have quite a few for the speakers, but let's open the floor. Yes, please. I gave somebody else, but since you already took it. בבקשה. If you won't speak to the microphone, so they won't be able, but if you speak.
In 1989, there was a conference in Poland of artists that deal with ecology. And we were in north of Poland, and all of a sudden I hear from other room in that conference, in loud voice, the speech of Cardinal Glemp talking against the Jews. My Polish is very weak. I cannot understand everything because since age of 8, I didn't speak Polish. But it was frightening. So after a while, I decided to leave the conference. I went to Warsaw. From there, I took a train to Wrocław. Because my father is buried there, I wanted to visit his grave. On the way, everywhere when I went, I heard people talking against the Jews. Schmergy Jew, I heard all the time.
We would like to hear a few
questions.
So.
A stinky Jew. So it was horrible. I'm not שואלת, אני מספרת.
No, so please, שאלות, we will have time later on for other recollection, and thank you for that, but we want to devote this time for questions to the speakers. Okay,
what I wanted to say, it's not after 68, they were under a burst of antisemitism in Poland, and when they spoke to me, again, the Jews didn't understand that I'm Jewish or Israeli. And I had to speak to them in English to realize I'm not Jewish. I'm not Polish.
I know that there are many memoirs stored here among the public, and we would like to hear some of them at least later on, but we want to devote the time now for questions or remarks to the speakers. And you wanted to say something. Yes, please.
Hi, my name is Jacob Kaul, and I'm one of those from 68 with all the personal experience. Professor Stola described everything. I wish to comment. You omitted one very important element, that after 67, the Polish government requested loyalty letter from the Jews in each Telska Rzet. I'm from Szczecin. And that was a split within the community, which after people started to leave, and it wasn't exodus, Anna, it was exile. And very important difference. We have the blue book with Wilczy Bilet, I don't know how I would say it in English. So that split was visible. Those who left in 68 were those that were fired and didn't sign the letter. Those who left in 69 partially signed the letter or needed to finish 1 year of the university, whatever it is, by children. My question to Ms. Anna is...
Dr. Anat Plocker.
Yeah, Dr. Anna Plocker. Any reason that you haven't been talking in the new law, not about the concentration camps, but about the key element, that whoever is blaming Poles or Polish nationality of the atrocities should be sitting 3 years in jail at least. This is a key element, not the concentration camps. Because by the end, you also talked about events and complications. There was no complications. There were murders, loud and clear. So this is the question. And the last one is, sorry, it's coming back to me too much. I am wondering, because the anti-Semitism now is stronger than it was in '68, was it bubbling those 50 years under the surface? Because it was, but wasn't so strong. For me, being in Warsaw and going with a taxi, when he's shouting on somebody, "Bloody Jew, how are you driving?" I was laughing, okay? But those 50 years, the anti-Semitism was not so strong. It wasn't like Professor Stola is saying, who stole my exhibit from my exhibition? Jews to Palestine, that you can see it on the streets today. So I'm wondering what happened, who and how kept that anti-Semitism low down, that it was actually developing some part of presence of Jews, of Israelis, own relations and all this stuff, which is today not existing.
Okay.
Okay.
Maybe we'll collect a few more comments or questions, and then any more questions? Yes, please.
ברשותך אני אדבר עברית ואתרגם את עצמי לפולנית. שאלה לחוקרים דוברי עברית, האם בחוגי מחקר הישראלים נשקלה אפשרות להשתמש במונח הפולני פוליטיקה היסטוריצ'נה, מדיניות היסטורית, פוליטיקה היסטורית, להבדיל מהיסטוריה מדינית? נראה לי שבאירועים הקשורים בתיקון לחוק IPN, ההבחנה הזאת בין שיח פוליטי לבין שיח מחקרי, המונח הזה אכן הוכיח את עצמו. Pytanie dotyczyło badaczy hebrajskojęzycznych, czy było rozważane wprowadzenie sformułowania z polskiej nomenklatury polityki historycznej. Nie napotkałem się nie spotkałem tego sformułowania na przykład w mediach izraelskich. Wydaje mi się, że to jest bardzo skuteczny instrument intelektualny rozróżnienia dyskursu politycznego od dyskursu historycznego i badawczego. I השאלה השנייה היא לפרופסור סטולה, אני אתחיל בפולנית. Czy nie przesadzamy czasem z tą mantrą wojny sześciodniowej? Już 10 lat temu Piotr Rosenka opublikował dokumenty MSW, z których wynikało, że istniały nie tylko wola polityczna, ale i decyzja rozprawienia się z tak zwaną autonomią organizacji żydowskich. Posiedzenie kolegium MSW odbyło się 4-11 kwietnia 1967 roku, kiedy jeszcze izraelski sztab generalny nie miał ostatecznych planów rozpoczęcia działań wojennych. האם אנחנו לא מגזימים קצת עם הדגש שאנחנו נותנים לתפקידה של מלחמת ששת הימים בכל האירועים שהשפיעו מאוד על ישראל, אבל כנראה קצת פחות על פולין. ההיסטוריון אוסנקה פרסם תעודות של משרד הפנים הפולני מגלות את ההחלטה הפוליטית לסגור חשבון עם מוסדות יהודי פולין, עם המוסדות הרבים שהיו קיימים אז.
Let's hear just one more question.
Hi, thank you. My name is Lindsay Shapiro. I'm a master's student at the University of Haifa, writing my master's thesis on this topic, and I have lots of questions, but I'll keep it to this for now. In my research so far, I don't speak Polish, so I'm reading texts and documents in Hebrew and in English, and outside of academic circles and outside of personal circles, I'm sure most of the people who are making up this conference, from what I've spoken with people, it's a relatively under-researched and under at least spoken about topic, at least in the American Jewish and Israeli communities. And I'm wondering if you have an explanation for why exactly that is. And also, for the Polish education system, how is this taught in schools to students? Outside of course, universities. Excuse me? 1968, right, exactly. March 1968 in general. Thank you.
Okay, I'm not sure we'll have another round, but first of all, let's give our speaker an opportunity to answer some of the questions already raised.
First, let me mention that we know each other with Anat for many years, and every time we meet, we must disagree on something. So I'm not sure that Mr. Kaczynski wants to follow Gomułka, and I have plenty of arguments about it. I'll give you one which is not widely known, that Poland has dramatically increased the number of Ukrainian immigrants present in our country in the past 3 years. We have at least 500,000 Ukrainians, so certainly this is not a policy to make Poland homogeneous, okay? 500,000 people is quite a number. Going back to your specific question, yes, the question, what is the content of this act on IPN? There is no mentioning of the Polish camps at all. In fact, it's very broad. It refers to that anyone who accuses Polish state or Polish nation of complicity in or responsibility for the crimes of the German Reich or other war crimes and crimes against humanity. This is very broad. Polish state or a nation. With the state, it's easy. State is the prime minister, president. You can find out did they do something or not, and they didn't. But there are some questions. For example, but deportation of 140,000 Ukrainians after the war by the communist government, is this a case? It's of course a case. So it's obviously, right? So it's very clear that the authors of this act did not invest much thinking in it. Okay, it's not unusual. In many countries you have very poor legislation. What is important for me, that this act was ready by the Ministry of Justice 2 years ago. It was 2 years in various commissions, sub-commissions. No one has asked a single historian what they think about it. It's only when it suddenly popped up in the parliament in January. I was protesting against this kind of legislation already 10 years ago. The first attempt to make it illegal, such a discussion. And me and all my colleagues were pretty sure it's dead. It will remain in the commissions forever. And I understand that was also the opinion of Israeli and American diplomats, but this I don't know exactly. So since this moment, it wasn't only my declaration very critical of this act, but practically all historians in Poland, the Polish Historical Association, the Academic Councils of History Department of the Warsaw University, the Polish Association of Jewish Studies, the Academic Council of the Jewish Historical Institute. All historians were, except a few historians in the Institute of National Remembrance, but they are paid to accept it. So all historians protested. For me, this is not a conflict between Poles and Israelis or Poles and Jews. It's absurd. This is first about something very dangerous for Polish historiography. So I protest as a Polish historian, not as a director of a Jewish museum. It's much more important because it's undermining the capacity of a serious debate about the past, not only what the Poles did or did not do to Jews during the Shoah. So this is one. The question, yes, the similarity between now and 68. I have heard this question in the past weeks dozens of times. And as a historian, I like comparisons, historical comparisons, but they are always made to show similarity and difference. It doesn't make sense to show only similarity. And to show the difference, for me, let me quote a joke from 68, very good joke. And the joke in 68 said, what is the difference between anti-Semitism today and before the war? Answer, before the war it was not obligatory. Okay, today it's not obligatory. Today it's not obligatory. There is no governmental campaign spreading anti-Semitism. To the opposite. Prime Minister, President, even Mr. Kaczynski himself condemned anti-Semitism vocally. Okay? The relation is much more complex. The relation is much, even speaking, you said that no one apologized. I was standing 5 meters behind the President of Poland on March 8th. I was standing 5 meters behind the President of Poland on March 68 when there was a ceremony at the Warsaw University. And he said the strongest thing, much stronger than any president so far said. He said, I apologize. Please, I regret it. Please accept my apologies to the Jews persecuted in 1968. No Polish president so far has said such a thing. I couldn't believe it. So, he must calculate, because I suppose he knows that some of the people who voted for him don't like the Jews. Okay, but this is another story. Will it remain all the time for the 50 years? I don't think so. Poland has a strong tradition of research on ethnic prejudice. And we have data, sociological data, going back actually to the 1960s, who likes the Jews and other ethnic groups, nations. We have quite consistent data about this topic. And for me, most revealing were two results, which Antoni Sułek, a very good sociologist, once noted, is that when you ask a standard question on anti-Jewish prejudice, which is, do you believe that Jews have excessive influence on media, politics, and finance? And we have such data for many countries. So in Poland, at least 30-40% of the population, yes, they have excessive influence on Polish media, politics, and finance. But when you ask an open question, which minority group, which group has excessive influence on media, politics, and finance? You know what is the most popular answer? Roman Catholic Church. And only 3% says Jews. So when you ask openly, people don't think about the Jews, but when you ask specifically about the Jews, you open the trigger. What was the trigger? The trigger was the foreign reaction to the Polish act on IPN. That was the trigger, which was a big surprise. And here let me make what is similar to 1968. In 1968, there are several similar things. The most important difference is we don't have a single-party dictatorship, right? All the media are not controlled by the Central Committee. But there was an interesting similarity. Soon after the campaign in Poland started in March, many people in the West, in America, Israel, Western Europe, started to criticize Polish government for anti-Semitism, and rightly so. But some of this criticism was unjust, saying all Poles are anti-Semites, they imbued anti-Semitism with the milk of their mothers. You remember who said it, okay? And the Communist Party in Poland was happy to quote this statement and defend the honor of the Polish nation against these horrible foreign Jews. This is the best job for any politician, to defend the national honor. So the same happened in Poland. There was the act on IPN, which I criticize as a historian. There was a very critical reaction, especially in Israel. And then there was a reaction to the reaction. Who is the best-known Israeli politician in Poland? Mr. Lapid. Okay, if you want to sell guns or something, use him in an advertisement campaign. So, this is how it works. This is how it works. It was a reaction to a reaction, but now it's gone. However, when presenting 68, when I was writing my book many years ago, I said that it was a kind of a symbolic pogrom. We cannot say it was a pogrom. There was no violence, no killing, no beating. Well, there was beating of all the students by police. So Jewish students were beaten like everybody else. So really it makes a difference. You have real violence or symbolic violence. But symbolically, it was exactly to show the Jews their place. Okay? Today I would call it a virtual pogrom, because 90% of anti-Semitism in Poland is happening online, on the internet. Okay? It's not by the government, certainly. It's online. And this is very dangerous because young people take most of the information from internet. And Michał Bilewicz, who was quoted by Anna at the beginning, he made the specific studies how the attitudes of young people, teenagers, people in their 20s, have changed in the past few years, how they are getting used to very brutal language. They no longer recognize that something is really bad because they see it again and again online. But this is not only a Polish problem. I have a feeling that when you talk to Americans, for example, to British people who made the Brexit, there is something global in it, but with a Polish specificity that in Poland it's about the Jews. And second result of Michał Bilewicz's study, which was really striking, we have seen this increase of xenophobia against everybody, not only against the Jews, everybody. What was the beginning? What was the trigger? The refugee crisis in Europe and the wave of anti-immigrant and anti-Muslim resentment. Now, in this country, it's very difficult to hate Muslims and Jews at the same time. Not in Poland, okay? In Poland, you can hate both at the same time, and it's very strongly correlated. There was a kind of a green light for a very aggressive language against Muslim immigrants. We have 5 of them, okay, very few. But the language, including in the public media, and that was one of the reasons the Law and Justice Party won the elections. It was very strongly against any immigration at that time. But we see from sociological research that xenophobia is very ecumenical. If you hate one group, you probably hate many. It's also strongly related to homophobia. It's strongly related to hating of Roma, and so on. So that was the order. And this is the change in the last years, but I'm watching the change in the last weeks. And this is happening 95% online. There are no mass rallies against the Jews, nothing like this. So my question is, how widespread it actually is? Because online you never know how many people are active. Now, I'm receiving from time to time political spam emails. And I collect them. And in the past, for example, last year, I was receiving, evidently from the same source, strongly anti-Ukrainian emails. These Banderite fascists, they were killing Poles in Volhynia in 1943. I had a strong feeling it was coming somewhere near Russia, okay? In the last weeks, I was receiving from the same people, they probably don't exist, anti-Semitic messages. Why President Duda is serving as a Jewish lackey? Stop him. Why do we bow to Jewish interests again? So I suppose there is international dimension. In addition to the Polish-Israeli or Polish-American, there is another international dimension. But unfortunately, we cannot put all the blame on the Russian, fake news fabrics. We have quite a lot of anti-Semites at home who are very active online. And finally, the Polish schools. So first, in Poland, 68 is very well researched. When I was writing my book back in late 1990s, it was the second book after Mr. Eisler. Then was his big volume, Polish Year 1968, and in the past 10 years we have something like 15 books on 68 in different towns, groups, professional. It's very well researched, much better probably than any other crisis, maybe than 1980. It's really well researched. In schools, 68 makes a part of a series of so-called Polish months, the years of rebellion against the communist government. 56, October 56, March 68 as the youth rebellion against communist dictatorship. Well, the student wanted democratic socialism. They were not anti-communist in this sense. 1970, so it's in the books. I myself written a school textbook for secondary schools. But the problem is that contemporary history, recent history, is always in the last class of elementary school, gymnasium, and lyceum, middle school, which means this is the last semester, at the end of the last semester. And at the end of the last semester, all the students are already preparing for Matura, the final exam. So in 15 years when I was teaching history to students of the first year students, I always began my lecture with questions, to which year you have arrived in your history classes in the secondary school. 50% ended in 1945. 30% ended in 1956. And the rest in various years, which means majority of Polish students never had an opportunity to learn about 68, 70, 80, 81. Not because of any policy, but because of a structural problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. So, like Dariusz said, we often disagree when we meet. Yes. And I have a few things to say about Dariusz's comments. I would say, first of all, that unlike my predecessor, I did not use the word anti-Semitism, if you notice, not even once, and I don't, and I think that's part of my argument, that I'm trying to say something about projects of nation building, projects of othering, projects of creating a nation state. And I was also, when I talked about this legislation, of course, first of all, it harms historians, but I was trying to talk about discursive similarities between 68, and those are very striking when you look to how they speak about the issue of concentration camps, to how they speak about righteous among the nations, to how they adopt how they are obsessed with these issues to a degree that we've seen only in 67, 68. This obsession with the war, this obsession with the past to this extent, we haven't seen it. And that's why I don't also talk about this in the context necessarily of anti-Semitism. Because what does it mean? Let's say, okay, it's not that this is what I'm saying, but let's say Poles are anti-Semites. That doesn't say anything. Why is there an outburst of violence in 1968, 67? Why are issues coming up now? This doesn't explain. This term doesn't have any explanatory power. We have to ask what happened in 67, 68. Are these structural problems, or this generational battle? Is it a battle about the memory of the war? All kinds of arguments that we've had in discussions over the years about why 67, 68 happened. And it's also the question of why things are happening in Poland the way they are now. And yes, perhaps peace are letting in some Ukrainian immigrants. But as you yourself mentioned, who are they not letting in? Who are, right, how does this whole story of peace start, as you said, with talk about Muslim immigrants, with these views that we are the bulwark of Europe and we will stop the Muslims from coming in. And so again, anti-Semitism here doesn't really help me understand anything, because this whole process starts with this anti-Muslim immigration, and then anti-Russian feelings, anti-German feelings, anti-Jewish feelings. And this all works together in this national project of Poland, which peace does want to go back to this nationalist past, and who are their heroes. And so I think that we have more agreement than disagreement, actually, between us as to why. So, of course, Dariusz spoke of why this thing's under. How this thing isn't under, these events are not understudied in Poland, and they're not. Why so in the West? For many reasons. Decline in the study of Eastern Europe, decline in interest in Eastern Europe after the fall of communism, much less funding to universities to people who want to study Eastern Europe. So first of all, institutional problems, but also, and I go back to what Dariusz said, the Polish Jews of 68 and the whole issue of 68 presents, as I claim, as he claims, question marks to issues of where do I belong and nationality and nationalism, in the sense that, I don't know if you remember, we talked about this in a conference in Warsaw once, about the question of can you be of Polish Jews of 68 being Polish Jews, and the fact that this was impossible to be in 67, 68. There's the final ending rejection of this hybrid identity of being both Polish and Jewish. And this also existed in Israel. When the immigrants from 68 come to Israel, they're also told you cannot be Polish and Jewish. You have to pick a side. Okay? There's not necessarily everyone's subjective experience here, but when you read the press and you read what people were saying in Israel in 67, 68, this was very prominent in Israeli press, where you have to take, what were they thinking? You can't be a Polish Jew. And I think also so I think that also has sort of put a damper on studying this, because it sort of doesn't fit well into a Zionist paradigm. It doesn't fit well into other American Jewish paradigms about Poland and the past. So I think that's also a reason why it has been understudied. And lastly, I want to say it's been greatly overshadowed by Prague Spring. So when people write about opposition to communism, they've always focused on Czechoslovakia in 68 and not Poland in 68. That's the most kind of banal reason, but it's also true.
I'd like to say 2 words about this IPN law. I am a legal philosopher also, so I think that we should distinguish two things, namely legal content or content of this novel to the role of statute of IPN and political background. So I must say that from point of view of standards of legislation, this law is terrible. Simply it is a scandal because it is vague and also is not applicable for foreigners practically. So it is a very stupid. So one explanation is that Mr. Jaki, Vice Ministry of Justice, who is formally responsible for writing of the project, is simply a fool, how he is, by the way. However, it is too simple. So in fact, we don't know what about political background, a conflict inside the righties coalition or something else. For example, you know, everybody says that it is against Polish concentration camps. However, I think that a strict application of this novel simply doesn't comprise this phrase, and everybody can be excused. Okay, I use Polish as it is a primary meaning in English, place, a local adjective. However, everybody says that it concerns Polish concentration camps, what is not true. Another unclear problem is how it is related to Ukrainian issue. And for example, Ukrainian ambassador, I had an interview with him, says that we cannot agree with Polish accusation because Ukrainian nationalists and murderers in Volhynia, it is not identical groups. Even it is unclear whether Bandera himself was involved in this issue. This is an objection of Ukrainians. And Poles, I think that Polish government is now in a very difficult situation. So formally, it is not anti-Semitic in any word. You cannot find any anti-Semitic word or even implication in this rule. Of course, reaction of Israeli, which is, I think, quite justified because they defend the right of survivors to speak about this issue, was maybe too exaggerated, but justified. However, it was rare reaction, as Professor Stola said. However, I think that we will, that for sooner or later, political background of this affair will be clear. Now government has no way out. They must defend this rule because these voices in internet simply are quite clear. One remark about anti-Semitism. We don't know about, there is no actual sociological investigation. However, intensivity and radicalism of internet anti-Semitism is enormous. This is a problem. And this is a question, what sign is off?
Thank you very much. I want to thank all three speakers. I personally hope that we will speak a little bit more about 68 and a little bit less about 2018, but I guess that this is something that is a little bit difficult to do today. So we have some refreshments outside, and I want to thank each one of our speakers for shedding light on different aspects of this important issue. Thank you very much.